meeting this August 21st, 2003. I'd like to welcome everyone that's attending. We have a new member on the board, Amanda. Sorry, I didn't get your last name. I'd like to welcome her, and let's have everyone introduce themselves that sits on the board. I'm Tom Halliday, live in West Provo. I have no conflicts with the agenda tonight.
I'm Eric Chase. I have no conflicts.
I'm Laurie Urquiaga. I have no conflicts.
Maria Winden, no conflicts.
Andrew Rennick, no conflict.
Amanda Peterson, no conflict.
Okay, let's present the first item of business. I believe that staff will have a report to read. Yes. The first item is Colin Geoffrey Brodie appeals the staff determination for legal use for property at 1045 West, 300 North in the R1 All
right, thank you. So here is the applicant's property, or the property owner that's requesting this appeal from the board for a staff decision on a letter for zone verification. Here are some photos of the existing home on the property. And so just to give you a little bit of background on some of the history of the property. So it was rezoned back in 1998 to the R16 zone, which it is currently zoned as. So what that essentially did was take the structure was a duplex. And so when it got rezoned to a single family residential zone, that created a non-conforming duplex. Then the redevelopment agency of Provo purchased the home and converted it to a single family home in 2006. And so it was a single family home with an accessory dwelling unit. And then it was sold to owner occupant so that they could legally use it and have an accessory dwelling unit in the home. So in 2007, a zone verification letter was produced by the city, which had the legal use listed in there as a single family residential home with an accessory dwelling unit. Later in 2012 and in 2013, there was other zone verifications requested and provided by the city that confirmed that same use of the single family home with an accessory dwelling unit. So like I said, the property is still currently zoned for single family residential. Duplexes aren't permitted use in that zone. So to get a duplex, it would have to be rezoned to a zone that would allow for a duplex. The ADU, the accessory dwelling unit, that requires that the owner of the property lives in one of the units and then is able to rent out the accessory dwelling apartment. So that's what that helps ensure, that there's an owner on the property and not just both units being rented out. So the current owner purchased the property in 2014 and has been renting it out, they mentioned, for the last 9 years. When they purchased the property during that due diligence period, we don't have any records that a zone verification were done. If people contact the city to ask about what the legal use of the property is, we look back to see if there has been a zone verification. And if they request a new one, they can do that, which is what the applicant did this year in 2023, but not back in 2014 when they purchased the property. And so they're appealing the current decision, which is the same that it's been in previous years, as I've described. The city has not issued a rental dwelling license for a duplex at this property. So rental dwelling license is something that you have to get and then renew each year if you're renting out your property. And so we don't have record of that being done for the property to have been rented out as a duplex for the last 9 years. So the applicant has submitted some items that put in the staff report. There's the purchase contract and the listing of the property. They're claiming that there was incorrect information that led them to believe it was a duplex. And so those type of documents would be something that they'd have to work out as a civil issue. It wouldn't be something the city would get involved with. Those documents don't change the zoning of the property. So if there's incorrect information and someone purchases, it doesn't necessarily change the zoning. Like I said, they'd have to go back and have a civil litigation or something potentially with the seller. Changing the property requires city council, so it's a legislative decision. The city council has to be the body that would make that change, and so that has not happened. The Board of Adjustment, your job is to decide if the staff made an error in the zone verification that was issued this year in its determination that's a single family home with an ADU. And so we're not looking at the purchase or the listing contracts and trying to determine if there was an error there. That's a separate issue. That's not part of our what we're here for tonight. We're just determining whether or not that there's an error in that letter. And like I mentioned, the city council is the one that would have to do a rezone on a property. And so that's something that they could request if they wanted to try to legally establish a duplex. They could go through a rezoning process to do that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have a couple of questions, Dustin. Could you put up the zoning map that shows that neighborhood and the surrounding dwellings and what those zones are? I'm just kind of curious as to whether this fits that.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on getting that. I don't have that map in the slides, but I can work on pulling that up for you.
Okay. And then it looks like it's surrounded by duplexes. So I'm kind of curious as to why the zone was changed.
Yeah, back in 1998 is when it was rezoned. I don't know the history behind that choice, but that was a legislative decision.
And it would be useful for me to be able to see that map if somebody can bring up
Yeah, we can pull that up.
that map.
So for the previous 10 years, this has been an owner-occupied residence with a ADU connected to it, and the owner has been living in it.
To my knowledge, from what they've stated, they've rented it out, both units, as a duplex and haven't resided there.
So it's been a non-compliance duplex.
Correct. And so, yeah, no, that's come to the city's attention, and the city's redone a zone verification and still says it's a single family residential with an accessory dwelling, which would require owner occupancy.
If for a conforming ADU with owner occupancy, do you still need a rental dwelling license? Is that right?
My understanding is that you need to get one and then you renew it each year. So
Okay.
you don't have to reapply. It's just a renewal.
Okay, and the city's taken the strategy that these will be enforced as criminal offenses. Is that right? By standing.
I mean, that does happen eventually if there's non-compliance. Thing on sufficiently. Okay. That can happen eventually if there's non-compliance. It's not usually something that happens, instantaneously the second someone sees a violation, but zoning people do investigate it. And certainly rental dwelling licenses are things which can be taken to court and prosecuted.
I have one more question. Do we know if renters would be if people would be displaced by the action? I assume so. If we're requiring owner occupancy, that would mean someone would have to be removed.
Yeah, so our zoning compliance division, they work on all those issues of timing of how long they'll give someone to bring the property into compliance with the legal use. Once the city's aware of an illegal use of a property, they'll issue the letters that they need to bring it into compliance, and they'll give them deadlines. And I'm not exactly sure what those are in a situation like this.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So in 1998, when it was deemed non-conforming, when it was rezoned, I'm assuming the other duplexes on the street were conforming? And do we know what the definition of a duplex was in 1998?
Yeah, so the zoning that it was changed from to the R16 zone that it currently is, I believe was a R2 zone, which allowed for duplexes as a permitted use. And so we'll take a look at the zoning map here in a minute, but any properties in that zone that had established a legal duplex, when the area was rezoned to the R16, those would go from a conforming duplex to a non-conforming duplex, just because the zone has changed and they no longer meet they have a legally established duplex, and as long as they continue that use, then that's fine. In the case on this property, the redevelopment agency purchased the property and basically took away the duplex and made it a single family home with an ADU, and then sold the property as a single family home with an owner occupant requirement. So that doesn't always happen. The property could have continued to be a duplex. And if they maintain that legal use, then that would be a non-conforming duplex, and that would be fine. But in this case, we have records showing that it was converted, and so it no longer has that right to be a duplex.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So based on the map, it's looking like that entire area is R16, but there are some non-conforming duplexes that are grandfathered?
That would be my guess. Yeah, if there's any that are legally established in the previous zone.
Do you know the answer to that, Nick?
What was the question here?
It's looking like, if I'm reading this correctly, the area is R16, but are there non-conforming grandfathered duplexes on that street?
I mean, I don't have that information on me, but non-conformities, it's individual properties. So even if other ones had potential non-conforming ones, that relates to that individual property.
Yeah, if they were legally established and maintained that, then they would be. We haven't gone through and checked all of those for this because we're looking at this specific property. So my guess would be that there would be potential non-conforming duplexes in this area.
Does that non-conforming status, grandfathered status, carry over from one owner to the next, or does it expire when the property is sold?
If they continuously use it as a duplex, then it would continue with the new owner. But like I mentioned on this property, when the RDA purchased it and became the new owner, they decided that they didn't want it to be a duplex anymore, and they wanted to convert it and lose that right to have a duplex.
Okay. Thank you.
Does any of the board have any more questions? So do we have a representative of this property here? Could you come up and state your name, please?
Thank you. My name is John Sears, and I'm the owner of Wasatch Property Managers, and we represent Colin Brodie. Colin lives in South America, and he is high in the Andes right now. He spends a lot of time in the mountains, I think, just to get away from life, right? It's our opinion, and I'll read a statement from Colin. I asked him, since when I knew that he wasn't going to be here, I asked him to write something that I could present to you on his behalf. But from my perspective, I believe the city staff has arbitrarily targeted this particular property. His comment was, I think the point to be made at the hearing is that the current rental arrangements without owner occupancy have been in place since before I bought the property. The people I bought it from had bought it from Provo City, and in their seller's disclosure, and staff mentioned that could be a civil matter. The seller's disclosure did not mention that there was any conflict with those zoning, and had it rented to separate parties in the same way that it is now rented. Mr. Brodie believes or remembers specifically in discussions that the previous owners, and they were the Lynn's, L-Y-N-N, that they had in fact rented both units. A picture taken from the assessor's website on looks like March 21st, 2007, clearly shows two access points. The same access points, same driveways. One is a carport, one is a single car garage. And both have been rented by Mr. Brodie with the understanding that the history was such that both units were rented 1045 and the adjacent unit 1047. So just recently, we found that there was an investigation, and again, as I believe, that this property was unfairly targeted. There are clearly other properties, other duplexes being rented in that zone. Both properties in a particular home, and I find it really interesting that they have been determined to be grandfathered, whereas this specific property is not allowed to be grandfathered, and I think that's a problem. Mr. Brodie bought his property in good faith and good knowledge that there had been renters in both units. Right now, we have 3 young men in 1045, all returned from missions. We have a young single woman in 1047. It's quiet. There are no issues between the tenants, and in fact, there have been. I called Provo City Power this afternoon because there are 2 electric meters on the back end of the property, and so clearly both tenants have been paying for power. For how long, I don't know. The city had a conversion of their computer system, or the city power folks had a revision of their computer system. Their records don't go back beyond 3 years, so I'm not able to tell you when those meters were first installed. But it's clearly Mr. Brodie's opinion that this is targeted enforcement, and that it should be allowed to be grandfathered as other duplexes in this community, in this zone, have been grandfathered.
Does the board have a question they'd like to enforce?
In the staff report, it said the property owner is the one who requested a zone verification. Is that right?
I don't know the process. I know the city has been in touch with with Mr. Brodie. To what extent he has communicated with the city or staff, I'm not aware of that, other than our responsibility is to provide tenants for both properties, and has been for, I believe, about 6 or 7 years of the time that he has owned it. And so I don't, honestly, Eric, I don't know what those communications have been between the city staff and him, other than he asked me to appear on his behalf here today.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have the name of the previous property owner?
Yeah, according to the, I can give it to you here if you'd like me
Sure.
to.
If you're looking for the LINs on page 14 of our report, has that information.
So this owner has owned the property for 6 years.
Since 2014, I believe. Yeah. I believe that's how long he's owned it, yes.
Do we know how the problem with the rental dwelling infraction came about? Do we know, was that a neighbor that
I'm not
brought
aware.
this about, or do we know how it came about?
I'm not aware. Well, we have had in 1045, we had a young family move. They now live in Oregon. We had another young lady move to another apartment, and so both have been rented out. But I'm not aware of the source of any communication.
Okay. We have any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Is there a neighborhood district chair here? Looks like nobody, huh? Is there any public that would like to, anybody that would like to come forth and present anything? We have anything hooked up over the internet? Don't need to worry about that. Okay. Well, we'll close this hearing to public comment. The board will discuss the items.
I'll say that it's really unfortunate when realtors and sellers misrepresent the property, because buyers then get left on the hook. But I also have an appreciation for the requirement that single-family dwellings be owner-occupied. I'm not happy that Mr. Brodie is in this position. I think it is somewhat unfair, although you'd think a good title search would come up with something like that. But I also know that a home in my neighborhood was recently sold, and the realtor was representing it knowingly as being a duplex when it was not. Fortunately, the people who bought it investigated and are complying with the zoning. So it is, it's really unfortunate, but I don't see, if if it was rezoned and the chain of duplex occupancy was broken, then I don't see how it could be re-grandfathered to comply with that. I think that the proper course of action is for Mr. Brodie to see if he can get it rezoned, but I doubt that would be possible given that the rest of the neighborhood is R16 and pocket rezones are not favored.
I think I agree. I think kind of as a quasi judicial body, I hesitate to give recommendations. But essentially confining ourselves to the question of, did the staff determine this appropriately? I think absolutely. I think it's a very clear break in any kind of case for a grandfathered in non-conforming situation. And so I think that's kind of the beginning and end of our purview.
I too am sad that Mr. Brodie finds himself in this situation. Unfortunately, it's one that happens way too often. And it's upsetting when realtors and sellers do this kind of thing. In reviewing the seller property condition disclosure and the agent report, I note that in the agent report for zoning, there's nothing. There's no answer whatsoever. And in the seller property condition, it does state that they're not aware of any local zoning and restrictive covenants. However, there's a zoning verification letter that was requested and mailed 2 years before they sold their property. So, I'm not going to sit here and say what they knew and what they didn't know, but the dates don't jive for me. And I'm sorry that Mr. Brodie is now in this situation. But like Andrew said, did Provo City make a mistake in their determination? And they have not. The property was rezoned R16A, but this property had a non-conforming use of a duplex when the property was when this area was rezoned R16A. However, this particular property, when it was bought by the redevelopment agency, it was remodeled and redeveloped, and it was rezoned as a single family with an ADU. And that is what it now is. It cannot go back to being a duplex, a non-conforming duplex. And so the staff has not made a mistake in their determination for the legal use of this property.
A few months ago, we talked about a similar property that seems like kind of a similar situation. But I'm not a big fan of the city doing like a hostile downzoning of people's property, but because the ownership change of this property includes Provo City's redevelopment agency, I don't feel like that's a concern here. So I would agree with the staff's conclusion.
It definitely brings to mind the importance of doing your due diligence when you purchase property and making sure you you know what you're getting into, and it can leave you hung a little bit if you don't follow through with all that and know exactly what you purchased. It's like everybody said here, it's a sad situation to get into and thinking you have one type of property and finding out it's something else. I feel for this applicant, what's going on here. But the matter of the fact is that staff has done its research, and it's just like everybody said, that it's not a duplex, and it hasn't been for a long time. Does anyone have anything else to add to this?
I wish it were part of the Realtor Code of Ethics that they encourage potential buyers to always check with municipalities. No, that's something I've had to do with every single house I've bought, and you learn a lot.
I can make a motion if there's no further comments. I move that we, based on staff's recommendation, that we deny Mr. Colin Geoffrey Brodie's appeal to redetermine the legal use of the property at 1045 West, 300 North in the R1-6 zone of the Dixon neighborhood, to deny his appeal to make it a duplex and maintain staff's determination that it is a single-family home with an ADU. Okay.
I can second that.
Is that good? Staff
Is that good
agrees that
enough?
that's good.
Is that all right?
I think it's close to comment. Okay, let's take a vote on this then. That this will be denied on staff's recommendation. Let's start. Let's just go through.
So I'm voting to deny the appeal, right?
State
So
your name, please.
Eric Chase, and I will vote yes. Yay.
Laurie Urquaga, I vote aye on the motion.
Tom Halliday, I vote aye on the motion.
Maria Winden, aye.
Andrew Rennick, aye.
Okay.
The 310 that's just moved into 1047. The ADU has been occupied by a single female. Her contract is up in April. Rather than force her out of the unit, or these three young men out of the unit, could we grant a waiver through April so that this young woman is not kicked out, or the young men are kicked out?
That's not something that we can say. The city planning commission will have to talk to Bill Pepperoni and to Nick and see what the city can do there.
Okay, that's what we would ask then, if that were a consideration, and then if that then we would be in full compliance at that particular point and still be humane.
Ultimately, that would be up to the zoning enforcement area, but they will see what they decide they can do. So,
You have my email address.
I do not, but I think it probably wouldn't be getting to me immediately, but I can take something.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move that this meeting be adjourned.
Second.
I vote
Okay.
aye.
Aye.
Thank you for everyone for your time.